The hospital room was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, too still, too heavy. Machines hummed softly, their lights blinking like distant stars. Outside the glass wall, doctors stood frozen, their clipboards forgotten, eyes fixed on the impossible scene unfolding before them. For the first time in 6 months, Amelia Carter had opened her eyes. At first, no one dared to breathe. Her lashes fluttered, barely noticeable, as if the movement itself might vanish if acknowledged. Her fingers twitched, slow, uncertain, but real. A nurse dropped her pen. Another whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Inside the room, Daniel Reed, the single father everyone had dismissed as just the volunteer, stood beside the bed, holding Amelia's hand like he had every night before. He hadn't noticed the change at first. He was reading softly from the warm children's book his daughter loved, the same one Amelia had once smiled at during a brief moment of our innocent month saga. And the little lighthouse kept shining, Daniel read quietly. That is when Amelia squeezed his hand. Not hard, not fully, but enough. Daniel froze. His blood caught in his chest as his eyes dropped to her hand. His heart pounded so violently he thought he might collapse. Slowly, afraid this was another cruel trip of hope, he whispered her name. Amelia. Her lips parted. No sound came out, but her eyes shifted, struggling, searching, until they found him. Tears blurred Daniel's vision. She's awake, he whispered, his voice breaking. She's really awake. Chaos erupted. Doctors rushed in. Nurses flooded the room. Machines were checked, vitals confirmed, pupils tested. Every protocol screamed this shouldn't be happening. Amelia's condition had been labeled irreversible. Brain damage, zero prognosis. End of life conversations had already taken place. And yet, TRSH was alive. Eva, outside, Richard Carter, the CEO who had built an empire but failed to save his daughter, stood rooted to the floor as the words hit him like a physical blow. "Sir, your daughter is responding." He stumbled forward, disbelief etched into every line of his face. This was the man who had signed papers accepting the inevitable, who had been preparing to let go because the doctors said there was no other choice. Now, the impossible was staring back at him. Inside the room, Richard approached the bed slowly, as if afraid SHE might disappear. "Amelia," he said, his voice trembling. Her eyes shifted again, slower this time, but unmistakably toward him. Her lips moved, and no sound came out. He knew. He felt it. SHE knew him. Richard collapsed to his knees. For the first time in years, the powerful CEO sobbed openly, gripping his daughter's hand as if anchoring himself to reality. "I'm here," he cried. "Daddy's here. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Amelia's fingers tightened slightly around his. Across the room, Daniel quietly stepped back, giving them space. This wasn't his moment. He had never wanted it to be. But Amelia's eyes followed him. SHE made a faint sound, barely more than air escaping her lungs, and struggled to lift her hand. Daniel turned instantly, returning to her side. "Yes," he asked gently. Her gaze locked onto his, filled with something no machine could measure: gratitude, recognition, trust. The doctors exchanged uneasy glances. Later that night, after the room finally emptied, Richard found Daniel sitting alone in the hallway, his hands clasped, head bowed in exhaustion. Richard stopped in front of him. "You," he said harshly. Daniel looked up, startled. "Sir." The CEO stared at him for a long moment. This ordinary man with teary eyes, warm shoes, and a heart that had refused to give up when everyone else had. "They told them it was over," Richard said. "They told them nothing more could be done, and yet, somehow, you stayed." Daniel shrugged slightly. SHE wasn't gone. "I could feel it." Richard swallowed hard. "We." Daniel hesitated, then spoke softly. "Because when my wife died, everyone told them to move on. To accept it. But my daughter, SHE still talked to her mother at night. Still believed. And sometimes, belief is the only thing left." Silence stretched between them. Then Richard did something no one had ever seen him do. He bowed his head. "Thank you," he said. For saving my daughter when I couldn't. Tears slid down Daniel's face, but he smiled. She saved herself. I just listened. Over the following weeks, Amelia's recovery stunned the medical world. Her brain activity continued to improve. She began to speak, slowly, painfully, but clearly. Physical therapy was grueling, progress uneven, but every step forward felt like a miracle stacked upon another. Doctors published papers, specialists flew in, none could fully explain why she woke up, or why it happened when it did. But Amelia called. One afternoon, as Daniel prepared to leave, Amelia asked for him. When he entered the room, he smiled, a real smile this time. You didn't leave, he said softly. Daniel shook his head. No, I heard you, he continued. Even when I couldn't answer. Your stories, your voice. It felt like a rope. Like something pulling him back. Daniel's throat tightened. I'm glad you come back. He reached for his hand. So am I. Outside the room, Richard watched through the glass, understanding something he never had before. Money could be the best doctors. Power could open any door. But love, quiet, stubborn, unconditional, was what had brought his daughter home. And it had come from the one person no one had believed mattered. The morning sunlight piped gently through the hospital windows, touching the walls with a warmth that felt unfamiliar after months of still white and endless nights. For the first time, the room didn't feel like a place of endings. It felt like a beginning. Amelia Carter sat upright in her bed, her legs wrapped in a soft blanket, her hands stronger now, her eyes brighter. The machines that once surrounded her were gone, replaced by flowers, cards, and quiet hope. She was alive. Not just breathing, but living. Across the room, Daniel Reed sat beside his daughter Lily, who was carefully arranging crayons on the small table near the window. Daddy, Lily whispered, smiling, Miss Amelia is lying. Daniel looked up, and there it was. A sound no one had dared imagine weeks earlier. Amelia's laughter was soft and genuine, but it was real. The kind of sound that filled a room and pushed the past away. Daniel smiled back, his heart full in a way he hadn't felt since his wife passed away. Moments later, the door opened. Richard Carter entered, not in his usual sharp suit, not surrounded by assistants or phone calls, but in simple clothes, carrying two paper cups of coffee like an ordinary father. He paused, watching the scene. The man who once measured life in profits and deadlines now measured it in moments like this. Good morning, Richard said quietly. Amelia turned. Good morning, Dad. The word Dad still shook him every time he said it. He nodded, fighting tears. How are you feeling, Daddy? Strong, he replied. Tired, but strong. Richard smiled, then looked at Daniel. I was hoping we could talk. Daniel stood, yawned. Oh, of course. They stepped into the hallway, where months earlier hope had nearly died. I've made a decision, Richard said, his voice calm but firm. I'm stepping down as CEO. Daniel blinked. Sir, I spent my life building something big, Richard continued. And nearly lost the only thing that mattered. I won't make that mistake again. Daniel nodded slowly. Your daughter needs you. Yes, Richard said. And I owe you more than gratitude. He handed Daniel a folder. Daniel hesitated, then opened it. Inside were documents, medical sponsorships, education for NDS, and a letter of appointment. You're offering him a job? Daniel asked, stunned. I'm offering you a purpose, Richard replied. I'm starting a foundation for families doctors have given upon. For patients without voices. I want you to run it. Daniel's hands trembled. I'm just a single dad. Richard smiled. Exactly. You understand what the world forgets. Daniel looked down at the papers, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Richard said softly. Daniel nodded. Yes. Back in the room, Amelia watched them return. She looked at Daniel and said, You're not leaving, are you? Daniel smiled. No, I'm not going anywhere. Tears filled her eyes. You promised. I keep my promises. Weeks later, Amelia took her first steps outside the hospital. The world greeted her with applause. flashing cameras, and tears from strangers who had followed her story. But sh I narrate them all. Her eyes were fixed on Daniel and Lily waiting at the edge of the sidewalk. When sh reached them, sh knelt, slowly, carefully, and hugged Lily. Thank you, Amelia whispered. For what? Lily asked. For believing my friend was still there. Daniel watched, realizing something profound. Sometimes, miracles come through science. Sometimes, through fate. And sometimes, through a child who refuses to let go. Months passed. The Carter Reed Foundation became a beacon of hope. Families once told to prepare for losses now found support, advocacy, and, most importantly, someone who stayed when the world walked away. Amelia became its voice. At the Foundation's first public event, sh stood at the podium, her hands steady, her voice clear. They told my father to let him go, sh said. They told him hope was dangerous. But one man didn't listen. Sh turned to Daniel sitting in the front row. He stayed. He spoke to him when I couldn't answer. He believed when belief seemed foolish. And because of that, I'm here. The audience rose to its feet. Daniel wiped his eyes. Later that evening, Amelia found him standing alone on the balcony overlooking the city. You saved my life, sh said. Daniel shook his head. No, I just refused to drive up. Sh smiled. That is the same thing. A gentle breeze passed between them. Do you know what I remember most? Amelia asked. What? Your stories. Especially the one about the lighthouse. Daniel smiled. It never stopped shining. Neither did you, sh replied. As the city lights flickered below, Daniel realized his life had changed forever, not because he chased greatnesses, but because he chose compassion. And in doing so, he became something far more powerful than a hero. He became hope,